Well, I wanted to start by asking everyone to look at the wonderful painting that Chris Brown has done in his conception of the parable of the talents. Obviously, here are the three servants who were given talents, which in that day were not the ability to whistle or whittle or paint or do something with their ability, but actually was a form of money. But you can look and see that these two obviously are the happy ones. You can tell this man here is sad, he's embarrassed, ashamed. It did not work out well. Now, what I think is interesting is to look at this gentleman here. Does he look mean? I think he looks like a pretty nice grandfather type. And it's very important as we look at this parable how these two servants experienced the master and how this servant decided the master was. Very different. Over time, there has been two takes on this parable. One, the traditional, the familiar, conventional. People have talents, some have more than others. The important thing is to use the talents you have to the best that you can, and that's a good message. There's nothing wrong with that. Take two is a little more edgy. It's sort of similar to take two, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, the parable of the prodigal son. The first part of that's the familiar one. The boy goes away, comes back, his dad welcomes him, God's forgiven. That's good, that's right. If you remember, the second part was really the heart of that parable. This older brother who had an edgy relationship with his father, who had a lot to learn. Similarly, in this parable, the last part of the parable is really where the attention goes. The interchange, the relationship between the third servant. You'll notice two different times in this parable we have a demonstration of the amazing generosity, the kindness of this master who not only lets these men see what he can do, and when they double the investment, and his reward is to give it to them, which is just unheard of. The other man says, I knew that you were hard and you were harsh, that you reap where you didn't sow and you gather where you didn't scatter. And so I was afraid and I buried it, so just here it's back. And in the course of the story, this is not a prediction of the future, but in the course of the story Jesus is telling, really, the servant created his own reality. There's no evidence that the master is anything but kind and extremely, exceedingly generous. And yet, when this third servant, in his own fear, his own mind, decided that the master was harsh and cruel, he created his own reality. So, I think the heart of this parable is if we live our lives considering ourselves sort of fearful and victims of circumstances beyond our control, and we live all frightened, withdrawn, nervous, anxious, we will create a lot of unhappiness. If we live our lives as recipients of $1 gazillion from a magnificent donor, giver, master, life giver, God, then we create a kind of joy and happiness that makes us more productive, makes us more open, makes us more kind. Just that joy that God means for our lives. It's easier said than done, but that's the choice. Do we live fearful or do we live joyful? God help us as we try to explore those two alternatives.